when Bill is talking about an inflationary pressure and he's providing a number that is rational, I can't dispute him on that. I see no reason why I would want to do that. And I don't know how you get away from the problem of a fixed income. It's an issue that's always been with every government. But critical services have to be provided, and they have a cost and it goes up.
That's one of the things, critical services. If suddenly the bottom completely fell out of our market, it would not be our right to go to the citizens and say, we're going to keep putting in more pickleball courts, so pay up. It would be time for everybody to tighten their belts. Well, I think we're at a time right now where we've had the luxury of providing more than critical services. And maybe that's not the right direction. And maybe the bottom is going to fall out. Maybe we should wait until it's a little more urgent. I feel like I look at the numbers of the money we've brought in and I say, well, we didn't bring it in, it came to us. And I say, I can't in good conscience say, it's just a little bit. And I know it's just a little bit, but to citizens who are seeing their whole property tax bill, and they're seeing what the county is doing, and they're seeing what everybody else is doing, to have the city just put in that little poke, it's not me. I can't do it this time.
Yeah, I understand where you're at, and I acknowledge that point. I feel that, I don't want to go off on a long thing about broken window theory, but a community has to maintain a certain level of standard, otherwise the standard of the community drops as a whole. You look across the country at communities that don't reinvest in themselves, and those communities become hotspots for crime, their property values drop, and the overall health and welfare of the community suffers as a whole. So, whereas I believe fully in the whole pioneer, use it up, wear it out, do without, I think at our level as a government entity, we don't have the luxury to play that way with our community as a whole. Our individual philosophy on that shouldn't reflect necessarily what we do community-wide, because there's a lot of diverse voices in the community and a lot of people want services. And I think we have the need to balance that.
So
I think that,
so that's why there are diverse voices on the council.
yeah.
Right.
And some of us are hearing the voices that are saying, please don't raise my taxes another $10.
I agree.
That's the direction I'm feeling.
So do you want to say something?
It's okay.
So every one of us had an opportunity to put their 5 cents worth in, and I wanted to give everybody the opportunity. I think it's been thrown out there by Councilman Entz that as far as the 14.5% figure or whatever it was, I don't know if a motion wants to be made on that, or a motion wants to be made on no increase, or motion wants to be made at a greater amount, but that's probably where we're at. Do you want to say something first?
I'd like to hear from staff about what it is they're looking for, because I think we've been through this discussion enough that we probably know where the votes are going to fall as far as moving forward. We've already decided that, essentially. So my understanding is that staff is now looking for direction about how to immediately get started on the public education piece of it. And so I'd like to hear from staff about what it is that they're looking for. Are they planning on getting really specific about what we think the number range will fall into, or are they just going to say, do we have your approval to start plugging in these different scenarios into the education, to ask for feedback from the citizens?
So for us, the scenarios in front of you to get an idea of what number. You could see that the old message that was used in 2017, I think those templates were also taken from the league. So I'd like to expand it beyond that as far as our messaging, but what is our message that we're sending out to the community? And what percentage are we discussing? Because that's what matters. And so we need to just finalize that number. From a staff perspective, I will share that I do appreciate the conversation on inflation. That's definitely a huge concern for us. And again, I'll put in another plug for our employees who work tirelessly and very hard to keep our costs down and find the best deals. And that's why you'll see that our number one asset to me is our employees. They've done a great job keeping our costs down, And so we don't have to continue to come back for property tax increases. But inflation is a real thing. So we're talking about inflation allowing us to expand and potentially go out for other master plans. That's one thing. But I know that other conversations have been adding officers. Well, that's another added item that's going to create more inflation for us in the future. So I think the message needs to be clear, because I'm hearing something different tonight than what I've heard in the last previous meetings. The inflation one, administratively, you'll hear us, we all agree with you 100%.
That's the lowest hanging fruit argument, that's so simple.
Sure, and I think,
That's not
again,
the lowest hanging fruit, that's the reason.
and so, but if we're not adding 2 officers in the budget, then absolutely, I agree with that, allowing us to put in 30,000 for a master plan for this area, potentially 50,000 for Main Street, and allowing us to focus on those items, and potentially throughout this year. We budget certain items. We may budget $30,000 for a police vehicle, but just meeting with Lieutenant Ackerson today, that cost maybe $35,000. And we've only budgeted 30, so giving us some of that wiggle room would be very helpful, particularly for those ongoing costs, right? That's an ongoing, it's a one-time expense, it's an ongoing cost because we have to replace it every 4
Yeah.
years.
Well, and that's what I was trying to understand with what you were saying, Robin, is you were talking about using the one-time funds for salary increases, which then frees up money for other things, but that salary increase is an ongoing cost, right? So I wasn't sure if I was understanding what you were saying correctly, but, I mean, we have to be realistic about any salary increases. I also just wanted to add one other thing to the conversation. I think I maybe brought it up last time, but I'd like to reemphasize it. We've talked about the need for the policing. We've talked about how much we appreciate that. And this is George's point and Stephanie's point tied together, and that is the quality of our physical environment is also policing, right? It has that effect. When we keep things up, when the streets aren't full of potholes and the streetscapes are beautified, et cetera, that there's data out there that shows that that helps reduce crime and keeps the quality of the city that we want. So it all ties together, right? It's
It
all
does.
important.
And having recreation places for
Having
everybody,
pickleball
their
courts,
mental
I
health,
mean,
yeah.
keeping our young people healthy and
It-
involved in positive
It reduces
activities
crime.
and- Yeah,
But those things, we're not paying for
out of this fund. I understand that. I was just saying
Well,
to the
but
point.
Stephanie was kind of talking about that, and those things don't come out of this money. I guess I'm a little confused, Brant. 5 minutes ago, when we're talking about putting $30,000 into the budget to cover a master plan for this campus, we've got to take something else out. To me, that's rescue plan money. We don't have to take something else out. I'm not sure what I'm missing. Now, a couple more thoughts. Rescue plan money does not provide for salaries, to the best of my understanding. And so we can't transfer that to cover the salaries.
So, answer your first question is, what was presented before you is a balanced budget.
Right.
It's zeroed out. So if you add $30,000 item to it, we either exaggerate our revenues a little bit more, hoping we actually hit it, or we have to cut something out to maintain a balanced budget, right? So we either add more revenues, maybe we think, well, sales tax, we're being too conservative, let's add another 30,000 and add this 30,000 in, we're balanced. Or if we add in property tax increase, we add 30,000 into it in generating property tax, then we can add this item into it. You have a balanced budget before you. So anything before you is
So the
administratively,
balanced
we've
budget before us has nothing from the rescue plan money in it.
So the rescue plan money, there is nothing at this point. You're talking about, so the ARP money, there's nothing, we haven't debated or discussed what that money can be used for. I will share with you that those funds can actually be used for salary.
They can.
And in fact, I'll bring it up now, and I had this conversation with the mayor earlier, that the CARES Act funding allowed you to provide hazard pay to your officers or firefighters or healthcare workers. The great thing, the unfortunate thing about that was we had front office staff who were also frontline with dealing with residents who, dealing with COVID. And so administratively did not propose using those funds for that case. In fact, in September, we proposed, look, instead of just giving money to the police, let's discuss the salary rate increase for all our employees to recognize all of the hard work our employees are going through. The ARP funds, the rescue plan funds, actually do allow those, it's a little more flexible in using those funds for salaries for our employees. And the conversation that Jake and I have had, and we proposed the idea of actually using some of those funds for bonuses, for morale, and recognizing our employees, all of them, and providing a one-cost, one-time bonus to our employees, which is an option. So you can use it for that. But again,
But it's
these
not-
funds,
There's nothing in the budget yet.
no, there's nothing in the budget. Again, this is just a conversation I had with the mayor today that Jake and I actually had the conversation, and interesting enough, the chief came to me that afternoon and says, look, I would like to talk to you about recognizing our employees with this ARP funds.
I do need to
Interesting
say
enough.
there is a little bit in there already budgeted, and that was for any revenue shortfalls, and that was just in interest and in the court.
And in the
So
court.
there's about 200,000 there of ARPA funds that are built into this next year,
Now, I would hesitate in using all these funds in 1 year. We do have 4 years.
up to 2024, obligated.
2024 to use those funds. And so again, let's say that we do see a pretty tragic, economy just goes down because inflation has skyrocketed. Home Depot decides that they could start selling their stockpile of lumber and it's not worth as much anymore. And so I'm being facetious, but in all honesty, we could see the economy tank. So if there is a part of me that wants to be conservative, we use the funding. We don't have to use all 1.9 million this year.
No, and
That would
I'm
be
not,
very-
I'm not proposing that we should.
But we need to have a
I
meeting.
thought $30,000.
Right, but we do have, grants out there with the Ferguson Group for our 1250 West Extension that looks like we're in the top 5 projects that will receive that. Also, the Green Steel Tank from Congressman Stewart's office could be funded. We're talking about potentially 3.5 million coming in to help with those water projects. And so those funds don't have to be used for water projects. So
But
what I'm trying to say
those
is,
aren't guaranteed.
they're not guaranteed, but
We're
the
one of
Ferguson Group
five
is.
that he presented, which is nice, but.
So they can be used for salaries, back to your question. But again, $30,000, if you have a property tax increase, you're increasing our revenues, which allows us to expand. And back to another point that Councilor Meekum had shared is, I believe, in all honesty, we are getting this influx of funds, which is great from the federal government. But I still feel like we're still trying to catch up from 2009. I mean, we delayed so much in 2009. Every city had to cut back capital equipment. You've seen the requests from 12 years ago that we just haven't been able to fund because our revenues are low. I do feel like this money is getting us back to closer to being whole with our capital equipment. From an administrative standpoint, you'll see me argue, and I'll say it again, our employees are our number one asset, and I'll always propose recognizing our employees if we're going with ongoing costs, recognizing everything they put in.
And see, I can support that, but
And
I
I-
have a hard time supporting that and then turning around to my residents and saying, I'm going to raise your taxes.
I will share during all these recruitments, the recruits, the level of recruits that we've seen, I don't want to say this, Nate, close your ears, has been disappointing to an extent, to be honest with you. We are lucky to get Nate, and we're lucky to have some of the other recruits and other employees we've hired, but our pay is low compared to our neighboring cities, and it's hard to compete. So we're changing our strategy now to internally focusing on training our current employees and trying to build them up in our current environment and trying not to steal from Murray, or even though we did, Salt Lake City or Midvale or Farmington. Let's build up our own employees. But that's really becoming our focus, and that's what we've learned through these recruitments and the way we do that is making sure we compensate them fairly and competitively to keep them here so they're not jumping ship and going somewhere else and getting them the training they need. That's the ongoing cost that I think is critical to me.
So did you get your recommendation from staff? That long
So we're
answer?
looking for, you want us to focus in on one of these percentages?
Before we finalize, there's one more thing I'd like to ask. I know it's unfair, Nate, but I would be interested in your perspective on the discussion coming from a different city. Some of the questions that are there that have been entertained is, and I'd be curious to know what Murray does. I could probably look it up and find out. Did they do a property tax increase on an annual basis to try and keep the rate at the same level so that it didn't contract because of inflation? And do you have a suggestion in this dilemma?
Yeah, so, again, I've been here 2 days, so I don't have
Understand, and I apologize.
a huge suggestion without knowing the whole back history. So from my experience at Murray, we were very insistent that these were one-time funds. And so when we're receiving one-time revenues, we wanted that to go towards one-time expenses. The problem with salary increases, like has been mentioned, is that it's an ongoing cost. Once you raise someone's salary, it's
there
there or
forever.
more for life. So we don't like the idea of using these federal funds for ongoing expenses. And we haven't decided how to use Murray hadn't decided how to use the ARPA funds because we didn't have the guidance by the time I left. As far as property tax increase goes, Murray was in a spot where they didn't increase taxes for about 12 years. And then we had to do a huge increase in about 2018. It was about a 40% increase. The feedback that we got from residents was they were okay with the increase, but they preferred that we do lower percentages more frequently. And so they asked us to do 5 to 10% increases annually. Council was kind of torn on that, and they decided to do it every other year. And then when COVID hit, they passed on raising it. And so now they're up for discussion again on when do we start increasing it.
They're right where we are.
Yeah, so right.
So are they increasing it this year?
I don't think they are this year, but they don't have a choice next year.
They also have some other revenue sources we don't have access to.
Yes.
They do have a power department and other enterprise funds that help their general fund considerably.
Okay, thank you.
And Nate,
It wasn't unfair, it was day 2. Day 1, it would have been unfair. Day 2, it's okay.
just expect that from Councilman
Yeah, we're
Nate,
gonna
Scott.
expect a lot, Nate, welcome.
No, that was good, actually, Councilman. That's, Nate, you handled it well. Thank you. Okay, so do you have your guidance? So we can formulate a motion on this?
Well, the question is, are you looking at the 14.5%, or are you looking for a whole number that's
Yeah,
easier to digest?
I would have gone up to the 20, but,
That's kind of where I'm headed, because that's much easier to explain
yeah.
for me.
20 is easier to explain than 14 and a half?
Yeah.
Understand that.
Well, if you do the math based on even our last one and that we were 35% short to even catch up then, right? And I mean, it seems like maybe we're due for another work session on reviewing Randy's plan that now maybe is Mike's plan if he adopts it about the road needs, right? And to say that we've had enough and we're caught up there is not correct. So, so I would bump up to the 20. I think it's needed and it's easily explainable as to where the gaps have been all these years. One last thing I want to say too, I really respect and understand your statement that this is like morally, you don't feel like you can be in favor of this, but I would just say on the other hand, that's what drives me to push for this and these smaller regular increases, because I feel it's a moral failing of the councils to, for political expediency, put this off year after year after year. And that's what happened to us. That's what put us in this position. So again, I'm being repetitive, but I do favor the approach that we just heard from Nate and that they heard from the Murray citizens, and that is, but just get the citizens used to the process, that it's about inflation. It's about providing your services to the same level that they are now. And we really, unless you want your service quality to go down, we don't have a choice. It's what has to happen. Rather than it being this big question of morality every time, it should just be standard operating procedure. In my opinion, that's the moral thing to do, because it takes the pressure off of the individual councils.
So Bill, to answer that, 20 is easier to explain than 14. The reason it's easier to explain is kind of it dovetails into what Tammy was saying, is 14.5 is the inflation rate. 20 gets me a tiny, very tiny buffer that lets me ride that out a little bit, so that when the next, council decides to look at this, we have a little bit of buffer. We're not just chasing inflation. We're just a little bit ahead of it, so that we've got a little bit of wiggle room. Because what we can't anticipate right now is what the continued spikes in the market are gonna do to us. So I'd rather not be just at the knife edge, I'd like to be a little buffered above that, so that we can incorporate any of these spikes that come up, because, I mean, let's be honest, let's say gas by the end of the summer hits $4.25 a gallon. What is that gonna do to our fuel budget in Public Works and in the police department? Yeah, it's gonna go pretty significantly up. So, to me, the difference between the two is so slight, but in terms of the margin it gives us, it provides a lot more money for us to be able to buffer, say, just a fuel increase. That's why.
I hear what you're saying. I turn into Robin and Stephanie in 14.5 to 20. I think I don't need, I just don't like the nice round number 20. 14.5. We worked on it and came up with a very specific number. And
It shows you
I'm not
that
saying I
when-
wouldn't support it at 20, I'm just saying I think that the 14.5 is the better number.
It shows you did the math, and it keeps the explanation so simple, inflation. Is that what you're saying?
That's my.
If I can just offer an argument, the 14.5% gets you potentially back, and I don't know, Jake, if you did the math and made sure it was 14.5%, not questioning Councilmember Ensig's math, but just verifying, but that 14.5% gets you back to what we were in 2017. You still have inflation on top of that.
No, I
And
understand.
I think
you're
that's
right.
where Councilmember McEwen is making the argument 20% actually gets you matched up with the inflation increase as well. Is that fair?
Should get you close to parity. I mean, I haven't done the math to find out how close that is, but it should be closer.
And then when you add in that, even when we did this in 2017, it still is less than catching up.
Yeah, we didn't catch up.
We did.
We did the most we felt we could do, not get lynched.
So, but because we know how the votes are probably going to come out on this, 14.5 is probably the number that would go through. I don't know. We'll have to see. Because just doing the calculus here, if you vote no on 20, I think you're going to have at least 2 are going to join you on that.
So why don't you make the motion?
Yeah, why don't you pick the motion? Great point. You pick the number and we'll see where it goes.
I would make a motion that we direct staff to prepare for truth and taxation at 14.5%. And that the justification be for general cost inflation, so that we do not have to tie it to any one specific activity.
Yes, and pointing out that that is just getting us back to the 2017 level.
And it just keeps us in the game. It does not make us whole. We are trying to be considerate of people that are on a fixed income, and there are a fair number of people in town. So we're doing everything we can to keep it down. But at the same point in time, we are doing you a disservice not to recognize that there is inflation and that costs are going up and are going to, and from all appearances, will continue to go up.
I like that because it's the right thing to do, but it's also, when you get into the details, it's easily provable that it's still an extremely conservative move. And so it speaks to all of our citizens, right? Those who don't want us to be irresponsible and not be able to even keep up in the quality, and those who want us to be as conservative as possible. We're doing both with that number.
I think so.
I would provide a second, except for I truly believe we're going to be right back here next year having this discussion again at 14.5%. I'm much more in favor of 20, but it's still open for a second. So.
We've got a motion, we haven't had a second, have we?
I'll second it.
We have a second. Okay, we've discussed a lot. Is there any
And I
last?
don't disagree with you, George, but my point is we should be back next year to evaluate.
My only thing with that is I don't want to create fatigue in our city. Truth and taxation, just that phrase causes, hackles to raise, so.
It does.
Only because of the way it's been approached. I mean, I firmly believe that if truth in taxation is tied to your annual budget, then the citizens just learn that it's just a discussion about, are we going to keep up with inflation this year or not? Or do we have other needs beyond that?
Possibly. There's a lot of retraining to get us to that
Yeah,
point.
it's been done the other way for a really long time,
Right.
no question. All right.
So we have a motion, a second, further discussion? I think if you're gonna raise it, you go to 20 rather than 14.5, if you're gonna do the motion.
Well, the motion doesn't have to carry necessarily.
Okay? You
So
ready to
let me
vote?
make, no, I got one more thing I want to make before. I'm going to make a plea to Robin and Stephanie, that I recognize what you're talking about, but it's in the long-term best interests of everybody not to have another 40% increase a year or two down the road. And yes, we got a bunch of one-time money that can be used in different ways. We were flirting with going under state management with our reserves 3 years ago. And we could have been in a position where we had to, and I don't know what that process was, but would have been under control of the state. We got that close. I believe that prior councils did the residents of the city a disservice at the same time that they were trying to protect them from increasing taxes. And that's the reason that I feel that this is important and appropriate. I agree with George and Tammy that 20% is probably the more proper number. But in view of your arguments and in view of everything else, I believe 14.5 is more saleable and defendable. And I would ask you to reconsider again as we go to the vote.
I appreciate those words a lot, and I would say, I also think it is, for the sake of the citizens, the more united as a council we can be on this kind of move, the better. Not that we don't welcome healthy debate, we absolutely do, but to the point of we're trying to be as conservative as possible, but just doing the responsible thing. It would be great if that could be a united voice.
And I'm very passionate, you know I am, I put it out there. But I want you all to know.
You are, but you love the city, and
I respect all of you, and I respect what you say, and I can understand some of what you're saying in our financial responsibilities. I am capable of raising taxes. I raised them before because I really felt like we needed to. In my little brain, I think we did go 20 years without doing it, and I didn't see any change in my services. So I have a hard time. I would never vote for it to be mandatory every year, because who I vote for, I want them to have to make those decisions. And I do think that we could be doing the citizens a disservice as if we did it, if we put that it was going to happen every year. I think you could have, I mean, you see something that turns the tide and puts all new council members in. I'm not saying, I'm saying that that could happen 5 years, 10 years down the line. I'm not saying with us. I'm just saying you're going to have people say, we don't want our taxes raised every year. And I want whoever I'm choosing, I want to know how we are doing financially, and then I want them to tell me why they would vote the way they're voting. But I totally respect you. I can see all the reasons you're telling me, but I can't vote for it and feel like, I mean, I guess it's like when you say politically, don't vote for it because you're not going to get reelected. I can't vote for it because that would be what I was doing as far as I'm not voting what I truly believe is right. And so for those reasons, the people that put me in, I feel like I owe them, in my brain, the money we have gotten, I want to see where it goes in 2 or 3 years. So but I totally understand what you guys are saying. I totally respect you on it. But I can't join you, and I'm sorry for that.
Robin, you don't need to be sorry for that. One of the things I think is great about this council is I have never really felt that anyone did anything for political expediency. Everyone has taken on this role for the purpose of serving the community, and it's done with passion. So never apologize for passion. Passion is good. And even if it's different sides of the debate, because at the end of the day, if for the two people who watch this video sometime in the future, they'll
Well,
recognize.
I've gotten a text from one saying the video cut out and I was watching and what happened.
Oh, so we're gonna have to have a dramatic reveal on the part two. But
We've upped from 2 to 18.
yeah, we've tripled our numbers, but I don't think there's anyone in the city who is not going to say that this council has not put the thought into it and the emotion and the investment to come up with what they thought was the best process. I have never felt that anyone grandstands for the purpose of reelection. It's not about political expediency, it's about voting your conscience, and no apology necessary for any of that, I think. I think it's well that everyone feels comfortable enough to say their piece without fear of, you know, what is my neighbor going to think about that? Everyone does it, and I think it's great. I don't know of many political bodies that do that. And I appreciate that about this group.
So do I.
Okay,
But I agree with Robin. I totally hear where you're coming from. I just can't do it this year. And that's just because of the people that I've talked to with their individual situations who have just pled with me, please don't do this.
let's vote. Councilwoman Ivy,
Nay.
Councilman McEwen,
Aye.
Councilwoman Meekum,
Nay.
Councilman Ince,
Aye.
and Councilwoman Fillmore.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-2. Very good discussion. I like the passion that everybody has as well. So, job well done. I just get ticked at the federal government, but anyway,
You are the government, Mayor.
the federal government. I'm not the federal
Yeah, we can
government.
Where all that funny money's coming from.
That's exactly right. I want to call the chief up because, Chief, you can stay till the end, but if you want to go home, I was going to include in my remarks, I usually include about meetings that I've gone to over since a previous council meeting. And since you're still here, I was going to report on a couple of things you said yesterday at the fire district. Do you mind just telling the council about the fire we had on the hill and how hard our firefighters worked?
Yeah, sure, Mayor, I'll try to stay composed where
If you can't, then.
Oh, no, it's good. I've, over my years in the fire service, my wife has said, you've lost your my composure, and I don't know why, but, as many of you probably heard, last Friday, we had a structure fire in Bountiful in the Maple Hills area or the Miller Park area of Bountiful. We had one fatality. If Murphy's Law could come into play, it came into play on that. We had a lot of other emergencies going on. One of our engines that was responding broke down, blew a radiator hose. And we ended up having a fatality. The owner of the home passed away in the basement. During the firefight, one of our firefighters was burned, second-degree burns on his arm and back. We are doing the investigation into that right now. The mental and physical, obviously, effects of that is always big. The firefighters that are there, it's a high-intensity, situation. Myself, I was in Seattle at the time, so my wife and I were in Washington. My son plays for Utah State in the baseball team, and so we were up there watching him. So we decided to spend the day in Seattle before one of the games. And, so I spent a lot of time on the phone, obviously, with my command staff. Chief Stewart and Chief Powers were there, and it was good to have staff that things are taken care of. And wife thought that, she understood my anxiety and stuff, but I passed it off that we had a really good time in Seattle, which I don't remember a lot of it just because I thought I had a firefighter that was, severely injured. I didn't know the extent of his injuries, and as a fire chief and as police chief, and I'm sure as staff, anytime one of your members gets hurt or has the possibility of an injury that could be, life-changing, it wears on you. But between that fire, we had an additional 20-plus calls And then we had another structure fire in Bountiful, where we had to call on Salt Lake City and other agencies to come assist. We still have fighting fire at the Mueller Park, and I just commend my staff for the, you know, just their professionalism and the way they acted. Chief Powers had told me that our crews were at Station 81, which is our main station there in Bountiful, and they were exhausted. They were back kind of staffing the main station, and some kids came over from the park, and, you know, instead of just telling the kids, hey, we've had a tough day today, you know, they showed the kids the fire engine and gave them some hats and stuff, and it just goes to the professionalism of the fire staff that we have. So it was a tough weekend, and I expressed that to the board, and I appreciate the opportunity to express it to you. So.
What was the cause, and if it's not inappropriate to ask, what was the cause of the fire?
So they're still investigating it. The insurance company, the state fire marshal, and our fire marshal investigator, Chief Orwaller, will be up there tomorrow again just to try to confirm. There's still some questions on what that is. So I
Can't say, okay.
Yeah, I can't say. So our firefighter did spend the night at the University of Utah, and he was released Saturday. I spoke with him and talked to him when I got back. I talked to him several times during the week or the weekend, and then I spoke with him Monday, and we talked, and he's doing well. It's you know, it's getting bucked off a horse. He's eager to try to get back onto the hose line, as he termed it, and see if he'll be okay. But he's a pretty resilient young man, and I'm glad to have him. So
how soon, any idea how soon he'd be back?
I don't, no, sir. He's doing well. Like I said, they've bandaged his wounds and stuff, and he says his pain is manageable, and he's doing all right. Obviously, the mental aspect he's still struggling with. The firefighter that was with him, we gave some time off. He's struggling with the mental aspect of it a little bit, but I think he'll be back. So, and then a lot of the firefighters there that were struggling as well, but they continued to do their job. And, it's always hard to lose somebody in a fire, or a resident. That's always a struggle. You hear things. We had heard that there might have been another family in there, so they were trying to make entry into there, and we just, it was Murphy's Law, that's for sure. And everything that could have gone wrong went wrong, so.
So, there's a couple of Bountiful police that had some smoke inhalation
Absolutely,
with
yeah.
the hospital as well too, so everybody's fighting hard. They were trying to get to the homeowner that passed.
Yeah, we had one of the one of the police officers had heard from the wife that her husband was in there. He tried to go in through the door, and the smoke and the heat, and he had some smoke inhalation, was seen and then released. But and then we had another police officer that was in the area that just had some smoke inhalation, not as bad as the first officer, but. And I got a text from Chief Childs in regards to, what we could do to help. And it just, the relationships that we have with the police departments in our area, that we serve, the 5, and it is remarkable. And I talked to other fire chiefs around the state, and they just don't have the same relationship that we have with all of our police staff. And it's something that you just don't see very often, and that was good. And I had that. A lot of the police chiefs reached out to me and just said, hey, if there's anything we can do for you, let us know. So, and the fire departments too as well. But,
Thank you for all you do, and please let your men know that we appreciate them very much.
thank you.
And women.
So I appreciate the opportunity to come up, and thanks, Mayor.
Thanks, Chief. I'm glad you hung around, and you can still stay if you want to go over financial stuff with us, but.
Oh, that's good.
You're welcome to go as
Okay.
well too. While I still had you, I wanted you to give that report. I was driving down the freeway, saw it up on the hill, and I thought, oh no, hillside fires already? Are we that dry? So I don't want to say I was relieved to hear it was a house fire, because it wasn't, especially but I found out within a half hour what was going on, and it's obviously, you don't see very often where we have a a firefighter and a couple of our police officers are going to the hospital and these things, so it was a serious situation. And Chief yesterday so elegantly presented it to the board. And so I just wanted you to hear it from him as well, too.
Well, thank you, and thank you for your support. I mean, it's always good to have support from the councils, and I appreciate everything you guys do for us. So, thank you. But thanks, Mayor.
Thanks, Chief.
All right, have a great night. Thank you.
All right, monthly financial report. Jake, did you want to go over that, or?
Well, thank you, Mayor. The finance director is required by code to give a presentation quarterly and on a monthly basis provide the financials. So I haven't prepared a presentation this evening, but if any of you have had a chance to look over or have any questions, I'm here. I can answer any of those. We can throw it up here on the screen.
So what I've asked Jacob to do is just create that line item or the agenda item with the monthly financial for our residents can easily find it with just a brief background. It doesn't have to go into the detail that you get on a quarterly basis, and I just think it'd be good as its own agenda item. So that's what we're trying this month, and I mean, what are your thoughts? And there's no need for a presentation, but it's an agenda item, so if you do have a question saying, what the heck's going on with this, then we're happy to address it.
I enjoyed all the call-outs and markups.
You like all that?
That was good.
That's
I mean, I think it's good for
Great
the
job.
residents to understand too.
Yeah.
Oh, it's good for us.
Well, we decided a while back we were just going to have a quarterly presentation, but I think you put this on in February as well too, didn't you? I mean, a month.
We had the monthly, we had a
report.
monthly in February.
Yeah,
That was
so,
on there,
so anyway, unless council has any questions on it, then, thank you.
What was the $2 million increase in cash?
For year over year, it's mostly the CARES Act.
Oh, never mind, I read it
You
wrong.
see that?
I read it
Okay.
wrong.
Yep, keep out the call-outs. I liked that.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean I won't read the whole thing, though, so.
It's all mostly there.
Thanks, Jake. Next item is number 10, reappoint Board of Adjustment members. So 4 weeks ago, I was down in St. George, Roger II, one of our residents who's with the league, was there, and his wife Paula was there. She's on our board. Her term had expired. I asked if she would consider another term, and she says would be honored to. And then I called Brian Holst as well too, and he said that he would enjoy continuing as well too. So that was brought to you for reappointment of those to the Board of Adjustment.
Is the Board of Adjustment 3,
Board of Adjustment is 5.
5? Okay.
And how many times we convene the Board of Adjustment?
About once a year.
Yeah, I was going to say, that doesn't seem like we've done it very often.
Yeah.
So they could serve in perpetuity.
Right, because
We
we're
don't
not
wear
wearing
them
them out.
And Brian Holst said that. He says, yeah, you're not wearing me out on this one, so I'll continue, Mayor.
Then I would motion that we give advice and consent of the council for the reappointment of Brian Holst and Paula to the Board of Adjustment.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Number 11, the minutes review and acceptance, May 4th, regular session, and May 11th, special session minutes. Any changes on those?
Motion to accept the minutes as recorded.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Number 12, this week's city council report is if Councilwoman Meekum has anything to report.
I can keep that real short. Transportation Board is not meeting anything. We actually, I wasn't able to do the Utopia meeting, and Brant wasn't either, so we got a special preview all of our own. She was wonderful to talk through the budget with us. They're expanding, they're going to new cities. Their city people are higher. I believe we're at about 35% now in our city. There wasn't really anything major exciting.
Are they looking at increasing the rebate amount back to the city since they're swimming in cash?
We've suggested that. They haven't discussed it, or that I've heard, but we have put that out there.
I figured you would.
You know me and money.
Well, it's been an interesting last little while to strengthen the debate of internet as infrastructure.
Yes, it has.
It's true. Yeah.
And it's beginning to look like maybe sometime this thing will actually pay for itself.
Yep.
I don't know. I've been towing the other line for 19 years now, so.
No, I understand, and so have I, but it's beginning to look like it may.
Yeah, ubiquity of service will continue. I will eat something, you know, a shoe or otherwise on TV if we can actually pay the bonds off in total without running term. That to me would be the success, and then I would recant anything I ever said about the project. But until we get to that point where we pay off before 2042.
No, I think I'm not going to eat anything unless we've not only paid off the bonds before term, but we've repaid all of the money
Yeah,
to the cities.
and that's where I think we'd be so many years
I'll
down the
take your
line
higher
that
bar
it-
on that one. I think it's a safe bet.
I do too. I think it'd be really
But I
hard
would
for us.
point out that the idea of it being an absolutely necessary infrastructure, and so
Oh, yeah.
possibly the role of government to even, take those costs to provide for the infrastructure was, an interesting part of the debate that has been played out in an interesting way this last year, so.
Well, never mind, I won't go there.
Yeah, I mean, we don't need to have a huge
No, I
discussion,
understand.
but-
Councilwoman, anything else?
No.
Any questions for her? Murray's has got you teary-eyed, isn't it? So I saw you smiling over there and chuckling, so I knew they did as well, too.
They were one of the 800-pound gorillas.
So they pay a lot more money than we do annually.
So, all right, Mayor's report. Chief did my report for me, but I'll hit a couple other quick things. The Young Auto Group we met with, they met with DRC about their proposal on the frontage road of the Power Sports stores. I want to bring up to you this week, I know we have the flags lining our streets to honor our police, but it just so happens that not only is it Police Week, but it's also National Public Works Department Week as well, too. So I would encourage you to remember our Public Works Department as well, too, who also put up those flags along Main Street. So we appreciate all they do as well, too. So just please remember them as well, too. And then my last thing, and this will lead into Brent's if he wants to expand on it, is that we have a treasurer position, as you know, at the end of June. Jolene is retiring, and we are looking with that treasurer position of opening that up for internal candidates, because we feel that we have some good internal candidates that could potentially take over that position. And that will lead me into city manager report, if you want to expand on that further, Brent, if I didn't hit it enough, or whatever you might have. Unless there's other questions for me. Was there? Okay, thank you.
Hopefully there's no feedback on this. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, with the treasurer recruitment, Jacob, Nate, and I had a chance to meet. We have two internal candidates who expressed interest in the position. And conversation with Jolene, we feel that we do have some competitiveness internally. And again, as I mentioned before, that there's this desire to really try and grow from within at this point. And we'd like to really open this up internally first and potentially just leave it open for a week. Now, since this is a position that's appointed, I really would like the okay essentially from this body before we proceed. But just keep it open for a week, allow those interested to put in their applications and do interviews in the next couple of weeks. If we don't have any internal candidates that we feel is great, then we can open it up, but this does give us some time before Jolene officially retires. Great thing is Nate's here, so there's definitely some overlap that Nate can absorb everything Jolene's learned in 28 years or so. No high expectations for Nate, but there is some overlap there. So that's the proposal, is just a 1-week recruitment internally first. Is everybody okay with that idea? Okay, great. we've already introduced Nate. He's already been up to the front and spoke. I think Nate's doing great. We're looking forward to working with Nate, so. The deadline for the newsletter was Friday. I just wanted to make you aware that I've asked Jennifer to delay it until tomorrow, because actually I wanted to get this truth and taxation discussion in our newsletter. So the newsletter will be delayed slightly, but I really wanted this information, so Jacob and Nate will be working on that information to put in the newsletter.
Since you've delayed it, can you include a little blurb about glass recycling coming soon?
I think we could. I mean, I think Jason would be happy to. I mean, just take some PowerPoint, take some of the slides from the PowerPoint, throw it in there. So that's a great idea.
Yes, I think it's a good idea.
Did we get anything?
And
Jennifer,
it's going to include the fireworks map, right?
Jennifer, did we include the fireworks map? Okay, great. Thank you.
I just want to make sure we're being kosher to include the glass recycling without having a contract.
It's a teaser, coming soon.
Well, we did
Hopefully
vote to proceed with the
Hopefully
agreement.
coming soon.
Yeah.
We are pursuing.
Maybe in your, I think that anything we can do
That's a
to
good question.
reinforce is great, but you got a good point. I mean,
No,
I'm
it is a
fine either
good
way.
point, but
Well, I think that's a good point. I think we should delay putting it in this newsletter. I will tell you that
you think
Jennifer,
we should or should not?
we shouldn't.
Delay.
I think we should delay it.
He said should delay.
But there's not another newsletter for 2 months.
Well, so Jennifer's great. She's doing a really good job with the newsletter. We would like us to go to a monthly online newsletter as well. Draper puts out a really nice one that I'd like to start going in that direction and as well, not eliminating the utility insert, but just being a little bit more on top of it instead of waiting 2 months for the next newsletter to come out with pretty relevant, critical information.
Well, sometimes we're waiting longer than that. We're on 3 or 4 years, all we're doing printed, right?
Yeah. And the mayor just needs to come up with a message every month, so. Unless a council member wants to substitute
Yeah, maybe
take
we'll look
turns.
at road, if we did
That
that.
sounds like pro tem.
Maybe we'll look at road, yeah, do some rotation.
And finally, I failed to mention this during your truth and taxation, and I don't think it changes on my mind in terms of your vote with the 14.5%. I do want to make you aware, and I've shared this with the mayor, and she's no longer here, but we've had meetings with our administrative committee, with the fire department, and there are some serious concerns, at least that I have, on their funding for the upcoming years, that we're seeing a 11% increase this year, and they have a property tax increase they'll be pushing for 2 reasons. One is to take on the paramedic levy from the county, but also to increase that property tax increase to fund the entire paramedic services. So there is a property tax increase coming from South Davis. So our assessment this year is 11%. They had originally proposed 40% at the beginning of our discussions, which would be an additional $400,000 that we'd have to come up with. So you do, again, these are those competing interests. We do have public safety, police, but we can't forget about our assessment to South Davis, and I anticipate that assessment will go up another 10 to 20% next year.
If they're doing a property tax increase to cover the ambulance services, then doesn't that reduce possibly the burden?
So the challenge that we have is there's a differing philosophy amongst the commission as well as my board on how assessments and property taxes should work. Currently, property taxes are reserved for the 24 firefighters plus the 2 positions they'll be hiring. That's what the property tax is used for, plus capital equipment.
Capital, yeah.
So what we're moving to is a slightly different philosophy in terms of using it for ambulance. But what that does is any added costs are on the assessments, and so we will see our assessments continue to increase unless that philosophy is changed.
What, do we know what our per hour average is for our paramedics, what they're being paid?
No. Well, so this is, again, going back to the point where employees is critical, and Chief just went through a compensation study. Now their salaries are in line with the other departments, and they're not losing as many firefighters or paramedics. They're now competitive, is what it is.
That's good, because I know personally some young firefighter, paramedics in other districts that make less than, a burger flipper or, a warehouse worker, and they're making life and death decisions for people every day. And I find that kind of unconscionable that we compensate them so poorly in areas like that. So I'm glad to hear that they're competitive.
And just keep in mind that it's going to be very competitive coming up because you have the sheriff's department who's providing paramedic services. And when the switch completely happened, you're going to have South Davis, Farmington, Kaysville, North Davis, Layton, all competing now for more paramedics. And the sheriffs aren't necessarily going to convert to paramedics. They're going to stay sheriffs. So there is going to be a crunch in trying to train a lot of paramedics, and you're going to see a cost go up, the demand's going up, and I can see salaries increasing with that as well. So anyway, so the property tax increase is potentially a discussion even for next year, just to
So
stay in line
before
with our
you report on
assessments.
anything further, at the board meeting yesterday, I voiced my opinion that I feel that at a minimum, we should know what we are being assessed each year, 1%, 2%, 3%, whatever the figure might be, so we can plan on that accordingly for our budget, rather than having this huge assessment to us, and that I feel that they should do truth in taxation and to get their other funds. There's a couple of mayors that feel that way, there's a couple of city managers that feel that way, and there's others that feel the other way, that they don't mind a big assessment. We want some assessment because it gives us the board that Brant and the other city managers sit on, and the board that I sit on as well too, because we have skin in the game. But so that's further discussion in future fire board meetings.
I don't have anything further. Any questions for me?
Thank you. Unless somebody tells me there's a closed session, I guess I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everybody. You did a great service